Hello, and welcome to History is Awesome, Generals in Rome. That's kind of the idea. This is also the assassination of Caesar, why it's so exciting and incredible. So I'm going to tell a little story for you. Basically, got in the final years of the Republic, it didn't have Caesar as a dictator per se to begin with. It kind of so happened that a triumvirate, I think I'm now saying that word right, was formed of the three richest, wealthiest, and most influential people that were in Rome towards the end times. And this was composed of Caesar, of course, another guy named Crassus, who was like the richest guy in Rome. He was kind of the guy who survived on the fact that everybody owed Crassus a favor as a result of all the money that he was constantly lending out to people and then saying, I may not call on you today, but at some point for a favor. And then beyond that, you have a guy who is just famous. He's the darling of Rome when it comes to military action, and his name's Pompey. And Pompey had just had huge military campaigns. In the video I did previous to this, I talked briefly about his greatest triumph, where he goes down to the Mediterranean, and then just wipes out all these pirates that they've been having a huge problem with. And Caesar kind of enlists these guys saying, if we just got together with each other, we could basically control the Senate. That's what we could do. And they do it. That's the long and short of this. Is they do it. They succeed in controlling the Senate. Pompey ends up becoming married to Caesar's daughter, and so you got that that kind of close relation there that is cemented. And then to make a whole bunch of history really short, because I want to get to Caesar's assassination, things break down between all these guys. They're kind of running it for a little while, and it's still considered a republic, but all the historians cite this as the end of the republic because the power has become so concentrated into the hands of these three men. The greatest opposition that they have is this guy named Kato. Sweet name. Kato is he's kind of the ultimate symbol of old Roman values. He's not a part of the in crowd. He really is conservative. He really fears, kings in Rome. He doesn't want a new dictatorship, and he's always, always, always against Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar. So that's kind of setting the scene for this. And like I said, things start to break down. So the first thing that happens is you have Crassus, who's getting kind of bored. He's like 60 years old, and he wants some sort of major victory. It's not enough to be the richest guy in Rome. A lot of the historians talk about this like savage need for greater success, for bigger, triumphs. Just obsessive ambition is a major problem towards the end times of Rome. And so he takes off, and I'm bringing all of this down, like I say, so we can get to the juicy details of Caesar's death. But you can, of course, I'm going to put in my source if you want to listen to more detail. You can check out all this stuff, all the greater details, because they're interesting. He basically goes out for a fight when he's 60, and he's moving through these different towns on his way to this fight, for a little more glory. And he comes to this guy, this one town, and he's got this king that he meets there, and this king's building this structure that is taking forever. And he kind of comments to the king who's in that area. He says, aren't you a little bit old to be, building a structure that might not be around when you're alive? And this is kind of the historians taking a shot at Crassus for going on this mission, because then the king responds, I'm not the one going to war. So this is a little foreboding, everything in hindsight is 2020, that this might not go so well for old Crassus, Mr. Ritchie, trying to get more fame. And it is a sign of things to come. So Crassus goes out. He fights. This is prior to the Mongol Empire. I believe Caesar's actual death is the 15th of March 44 BCE, and the Mongols are around in the 1200s, or like a little before that, but after Rome, anyways, when they're most successful. But the style of fighting has been around for generations and generations and generations, where they fight on horseback, and these people have mastered shooting behind them while riding forward, free in the saddle. They can like shoot birds out of the sky while these people are riding along on their horses. And these are the kind of people that Crassus comes up against. And Crassus gets his ass handed to him. He's led out into a desert basically by this snake who's not literally, but the behavior of a snake, who leads the Roman army out to this desert, saying, we're going to catch them unawares. The Parthians, I think they're called, and this is who Crassus is after, and it's all a big lie. And he leaves during the night. Their guide leaves during the night, and then in the morning they wake up to all these Parthians, and they're all these horse-mounted archers, and they just absolutely maim the Romans. They destroy the whole army, and they go and cut off Crassus's head, and they dump a bunch of gold down his throat beforehand, kind of making the point, you're so greedy you didn't have enough. You're going to have gold poured down your throat, which is a theme you'll see if you're into the Game of Thrones, that is repeated there with one of the Targaryens in the first season. Anywho, that's what happens. Crassus is killed. Boom. One of the three is gone. And this kind of creates a power vacuum where the people back in Rome say, oh, you know that Caesar's going to be looking for it now, Pompey. You've got to stop being on his side. You've got to go after him too. Long story short here, Pompey has a big, big fight with him and fails. Pompey fails. And then when Pompey fails fighting Caesar, he retreats to Egypt. And then the Egyptians don't know what to do, because they're like, oh, he's come here and he's going to be looking for more of a military and stuff like that. And this is a really big problem for us, because that means that Caesar's going to be pissed at us. I know what we'll do. Let's kill him as soon as he arrives. So Pompey goes and gets killed after the failed battle with Caesar, because the Egyptians want to align themselves with Caesar. And it doesn't even, Caesar's pissed actually, he's like, oh, this was like the husband to my daughter at one point, and he shared a closer relationship than just to want him to have died in that way. But that seals up the vacuum that gets Caesar into power. He rules for a little while, and he becomes incredibly dictatorial. And now I've come to be able to tell you the story of his defeat, his demise. So basically, the last remaining guy who was against him was Kato, like I said. And Kato's one of these old value guys who doesn't like the fact that now Caesar is cementing himself into a position of power within Rome, and is really, really against it. And Caesar's coming for him. This is what's happening. Caesar's won all these major fights. Pompey's gone and dead now. He's pretty much got total control. And the problem here is that as soon as Cato's gone, that's it. There's nobody left to fight. Suppose that's not a problem. It's just the fact of it. So what happens? This is the juicy bits. You want to talk about some strong Roman character. The stuff to me that's awesome, almost unbelievable, that happens in these times. Kato hears that Caesar's coming. And when he does, everybody's afraid that because Cato's this guy of old values, that he doesn't want to see Caesar show up for what we would think in the modern mind for the strangest reasons. He's afraid that Caesar's going to pardon him for being against him and let him live. And everybody would think, well, that's just awesome. Caesar's going to let you live. Why would that be something that you would be upset with? Now, you have to understand that this is in a day and age where suicide is not viewed in the same way as it is nowadays, popularly, or like viewed so often as it is now as a result of Christian beliefs, where it's a sin to take your own life. And that is where it is largely founded on. And so Kato is thinking to himself that if he commits suicide, that he will then become an example to Rome, because it basically means that he believes so steadfastly in his values that he would kill himself rather than be pardoned by his enemy. And you wonder why, when this guy's always been against Caesar, why would Caesar pardon him? Caesar would pardon him because if he does so, then he's legitimizing his rule even more. In that same vein where if Kato dies, he dies as an example. If he's pardoned as an example, where Caesar can say, I forgive the Senate in Rome for not totally embracing my dictatorial leadership. It's just their mistake, and I'm such a nice guy that I've pardoned you, Cato, and it just means that you were wrong the entire time. So I want to kind of paint that picture around why this kind of might come into Cato's head, not just as a point of I'm giving up, but as a sort of last stand. So Cato is in his house, and the story goes that he's quite confident during the evening when he hears that Caesar's coming, because Caesar's only, about a day away at this point, and he's too calm. Everybody's like, how is this guy, he knows Caesar's coming, and we know the sort of guy that Cato is. He really stands up for his beliefs. So why is it that we're not getting a hint from him that he might be doing something self-destructive? Because those in his camp can recognize what a symbol it would be if he takes his own life, but they want him to stay around. They'd sooner see him pardoned. And Cato chats amicably at dinner in a nice, he's nice, he's chill. He's talking about the other people who had to flee, and hopefully the winds will be favorable enough that he will be able, or they will be able to get away. And just seems entirely calm. And then everything concludes for the evening, the dinner, the wine, all that good stuff. And Cato goes to bed. And then when he goes to bed, he's pissed because he finds that in his room, they've taken away his sword. And he's angry. It's kicking up a huge stink about this right away. And he goes, what are you trying to do to me? What if I were attacked in the night by assassins? How can I defend myself that you would take away my sword from me? Ridiculous. And so, after much, debate, they're finally like, okay, it seems to be that you're just trying to protect your own life. You're not trying to take it with the sword that you would keep. Okay. And so they return to Cato his sword. He's like, thank you. He goes back to bed. And a very short time afterwards, they hear a groan from the room, and they go in, and there's Cato, and he's pierced his chest with his sword and cut across, and his organs are falling out, and he's just groaning, and he's bleeding out, and he has tried to commit suicide. And they're just like, oh, you bastard, we knew you were going to do that. The physicians get in, and this is a couple of different historical sources that confirm this. None of his organs were damaged. They returned them to his chest. They sew him back up again, and the guy gains consciousness. This is one tough son of a bitch. I guess that's a point I want to make here about these Romans, man. Talk about taking one for the team. You can cut yourself open, your organs are out. You're in that, with old style, medicine, and you come to in the same night. And so they're satisfied with their work. They, finish up the bandage and everything like that. They take away his sword this time. No more shame on them or shame on him the first time. Shame on them if they make the mistake the second. And they leave the room. But when they return in the morning, they find him dead, in that he had ripped open the stitching, removed the bandage, and disemboweled himself again for a second time. You've got some balls of steel to pull that off. So it's just like, this is one tough S.O.B. So Cato's a really crazy guy, and he pulls it off. He is able to commit this act of sacrifice that can then stand forever as a statement against what Caesar is doing. And so Caesar shows up. Of course, he's a little disappointed, but he's still the dictator for life, and he succeeded. And so he goes back, and one of the big things, I mentioned this in my previous video, that they like to do is major triumphs. And major triumphs are full-on celebrations that are a way to placate the population after a big military action. But the problem with this for Caesar is that it goes a little bit overboard, and where you always have these jewel-encrusted floats and all these different things that are supposed to show off your successes, he goes about it in a way that is wholly disgusting to the Roman people, and that all their other triumphs that usually occurred before were the result of beating barbarians. And what would happen would be, you'd have these floats, and on them would be depictions of those successes where you're fighting a foreign aggressor or someone that you have invaded, a foreigner. But in all of Caesar's floats, he's got these representations of Romans fighting Romans. And he's so, stoked that he finally he got rid of Cato, however he got rid of him. One of the floats actually depicts Cato killing himself. Man, Caesar was a little power nuts at the end of this, I think, to have done that. And so the people don't like this, they don't respond well. And although it takes many years, he's still a dictator for about 10 years beyond this. But it's with these sort of actions that you even have the chance that people in the Senate can still stir up some feelings against him. And so what then happened was he was dictatorial ruler for life for quite some time. But then people got it into their head that they were going to finally off the guy. They were just like, he was planning in 60 years of his life, he was planning, one last battle. He was going to go to Parthian, and he was going to correct the wrongs of Crassus. It's funny, all old Roman generals go to die here. And he wants to go and finish that and get back all the standards that they lost to these people in this failed attempt by Crassus. And he starts to get that organized. And he sets in these other people who are going to look after Rome while he's away. And again, this ruffles more feathers because, it's one thing to bow down to Caesar. He's a pretty incredible guy. Conquered the whole of Rome, he's won civil wars, he's won many wars, he's a legend in his own right. But now, all the people in the Senate are like, we're going to have to bow down to these lackeys. And so this pisses off even more people. And push comes to shove, and the idea is, let's assassinate this bastard. No more of this stuff. Pompey, if you recall, is one of the three guys who used to rule with Caesar in kind of like call it like the black market Senate, but then he fought against. And so it's supposed to be symbolic of, Caesar betraying Pompey as well, that they're going to try and get him assassinated at this theater. And so a whole bunch of weird things happen where on the 14th of March, Caesar is out at a dinner. And at the dinner, one of these guys, not even necessarily in on the whole assassination attempt, says to him, what do you feel, Caesar, is the best way to die? And Caesar responds, famously, if you're even into this stuff, he says, a quick death. That's the best one to have. And so, what happens the next day? He also has a soothsayer, one of these, fortune tellers who also tells him in the same day all these weird things, adding up. Who says, beware the eyes of March. I might not be saying that quite well, but the 15th of March, beware this date. Caesar's having none of it. So full of confidence, so used to winning. That's all Caesar does is win. And in the following day, he gets ready to go to this meeting that he's been summoned to in this theater. And one of the assassins that's going to show up to this, which is kind of juicy, this is the craziest thing. His name is Brutus. And Brutus is an interesting character because Brutus is supposed to have lineage that goes back to when there was the last dictatorial king in Rome. Brutus is the descendant of the guy who killed that last king. And so Brutus, for his family history, is basically someone who should be known for not allowing dictators in Rome. But it's also, this is the other twist, the other side of it, it's also suggested that he may have been the illegitimate son of Caesar. So think of that crazy cross there. You come from the guy who killed the last king, but you're son of the most current. You're at a vortex of weird there. Okay, so continuing along. Caesar heads towards the forum, or not the forum, the theater, sorry. He's on his way there, and then finally, before he's about to get there, somebody runs up through the crowd. There's all these people usually trying to run up to get to Caesar to petition him with different requests because, you know, he's #1 leader in Rome, and so if he agrees with what you request, then you get whatever you want. And he puts a note into his hands, and this note is said to contain evidence suggesting that you are going to be betrayed today, and Caesar, in such a rush, does not open this letter. And he arrives in the theater, and then somebody comes up from behind him, rips down his toga, which is supposed to be the sign to start. Caesar whips around and says, you know, what is this, force, or some translation thereof? And then everybody starts to jump on him. All those in the Senate aren't involved, but there's enough there that are involved that everybody starts stabbing him. And the total number of wounds was 23. The autopsy was to reveal later that one specifically was fatal, I guess in a particularly bad spot, although I don't understand how you get to 23. And Brutus approaches at one point to give, you know, one of these 23 stab wounds, and again Caesar is quite famously quoted in saying, "Even you, Brutus," and Brutus goes and stabs him in the nuts. So no love lost there. And he falls after 23 stab wounds, raises his hands to his head, keels over, and it is the death of Caesar on the 15th of March, 44 BCE. A pretty crazy event, and crazy events therein leading up to. So I hope you enjoyed this. I tried to make it as abridged as possible. 22 minutes and you get like, I don't know, 100 years of history. But so much of it is interesting stuff. So if you enjoy, there'll be more History is Awesome coming up. I'm just about done with the fall of the Roman Republic, so I'll be getting into some more interesting stuff. I don't know what specifically, but all history is pretty I can't talk. All history is pretty interesting, so I'll have some great stuff for you coming up. And my sources down below if you want to get the podcast where I'm checking this stuff out. It's Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. Everybody should check it out. It's fantastic. Also my contact, you want to, you know, recommend a period of history that I should look into or a book that I should read. Any sort of really exciting, not boring stuff like that. So like I like to say, thanks for tripping with Dave, and until we meet again next time, ciao for now.